faithfully delivering value and interpreting great books from around the world. Hi, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today, we're discussing the book Saving Babies with the subtitle The Mystery of Newborn Genetic Screening. So, what exactly is newborn genetic screening? It involves methods like blood tests to sequence and analyze newborn genes within 1 to 6 days after birth, aiming to detect congenital genetic diseases that could severely harm their health for early detection, intervention, and treatment. Newborn genetic screening started in the U.S. in the 1960s, when the government launched a program for phenylketonuria screening, which showed significant success. As newborn screening gained recognition from professionals and the public, it expanded to cover over 50 diseases. In our country, phenylketonuria and congenital hypothyroidism are now part of the mandatory newborn screening program. So here's the question. If newborn screening aims to benefit the next generation and has clear advantages, why not screen for all genetic diseases? What treatments do newborns receive after being diagnosed with a genetic disease? Well, and why do many families oppose newborn genetic screening? The answers to all these questions are in the book we're covering today. The authors of this book are Stefan Timmermans and Mara Bookbinder from UCLA and the University of North Carolina, respectively. Both are sociology professors, specializing mainly in medical sociology. Medical sociology is a branch that studies the social functions of patients, doctors, healthcare workers, and medical institutions, and their relationship with society. In the book, the authors and their team conducted fieldwork, observing and researching 75 U.S. families with newborns affected by genetic diseases and interviewing genetic clinics and medical teams. Based on this, they provide a vivid and thorough analysis of newborn screening's rollout in the U.S., historical issues it caused, and future prospects. Now, I'll break down the book's content into 3 key questions for you. First, the origin of newborn genetic screening. Second, what should we do after detecting abnormalities in newborn genetic screening? Third, what problems exist in newborn genetic screening? What will its future look like? First, let's talk about the origin of newborn genetic screening. In the mid-20th century, doctors in the U.S. discovered that some newborns were troubled by a strange disease. At birth, these newborns appeared no different from normal babies. But by 4 to 9 months old, their urine emitted a very foul odor. Only then did parents notice something was wrong. As they grew, these infants' brain development lagged far behind normal children, leading to intellectual disability, inability to speak, and uncontrolled seizures and restlessness. Doctors detected high levels of phenylpyruvic acid in these babies' urine, thus naming the disease phenylketonuria, a genetic disorder caused by abnormal amino acid metabolism. Simply put, there's an essential amino acid in the human body called phenylalanine. People with this disease lack the enzyme to break down phenylalanine properly. The body has to rely on other existing enzymes to handle the buildup of phenylalanine. Since these enzymes aren't specialized for phenylalanine, they can't break it down completely, only converting it into another byproduct. Langoracans. Phenylpyruvic acid is harmful to the body. It causes the strange odor in the urine of affected children. When phenylpyruvic acid accumulates to a certain level in the body, it leads to the symptoms we mentioned earlier. Phenylketonuria isn't incurable. If detected early, supplementing amino acids can maintain normal brain and muscle function.
By controlling intake of foods high in phenylalanine like meat, eggs, milk, and wheat, the chances of symptoms appearing can be greatly reduced, allowing affected children to grow up like normal kids. Well, we can do this.
Besides phenylketonuria, there are many other common genetic disorders, like trisomy 21, homocystinuria, and thalassemia.
So, how can we diagnose these genetic diseases? In the early 1950s, doctors often diagnosed genetic diseases based on specific symptoms, but the manifestations vary greatly. For example, trisomy 21, also known as Down syndrome. Patients often have intellectual disability, developmental delays, and distinct facial features, such as widely spaced eyes, a flat nasal bridge, and upward slanting eyes. Even without newborn genetic screening, some diseases can be identified by distinctive facial features. But other diseases aren't so obvious. Phenylketonuria is one of them. And since newborns develop at different rates anyway, by the time parents notice their child's intellectual and developmental delays compared to peers, months or even years may have passed. By then, the damage is already done and treatment comes too late. In 1957, American doctor Willard Centerwall invented the urine ferric chloride test, which detects phenylpyruvic acid levels to diagnose the condition. This became the main diagnostic method for PKU at the time, but it couldn't be done until 6 to 8 weeks after birth. By that point, brain damage might have already occurred, defeating the purpose of prevention. In 1960, American microbiologist Robert Guthrie discovered his own child had phenylketonuria. To help treat his child, he developed a blood test method that screened for PKU by measuring phenylalanine concentration. This test could be done as early as the 3rd day after birth. Abnormal results meant intervention could start much earlier than with urine tests. Guthrie promoted his method to patients, parents, and medical institutions, passionately advocating for universal newborn screening. Thanks to his lobbying efforts, by 1965, 27 U.S. states mandated PKU screening for newborns. By 1973, 16 more states had joined the program. During this period, many affected infants were identified through screening. Thus, newborn genetic screening gained increasing recognition. President John F. Kennedy even signed legislation allocating federal funds to support newborn screening programs. Riding this momentum, U.S. public health expanded screening to include congenital hypothyroidism, sickle cell disease, galactosemia, and other conditions, with some states screening for up to 36 disorders. According to a 2000 report from the American College of Medical Genetics, about 4,000 infants with genetic disorders were identified annually through screening. And, although during the implementation and expansion of newborn genetic screening programs, some challenges and resistance are inevitable, such as screening accuracy and conflicts between mandatory screening and people's freedom of choice, and But overall, it's still a policy where the benefits outweigh the drawbacks. Overall, this policy has at least 3 benefits. First, the screened children themselves can receive timely treatment, which benefits their future recovery and life. And second, the families of these infants also benefit from genetic screening. Additionally, screening allows parents to avoid the long journey of seeking consultations and treatments later on. At the same time, understanding their own genes can provide effective guidance for future pregnancies. Moreover, the newborn's genetic diagnosis might reveal genetic disease risks for other family members. Finally, through genetic screening, doctors can detect early symptoms of rare genetic diseases. The disease progression provides opportunities to test treatments and significantly reduces the social cost of caring for a severely ill child. So, if a newborn unfortunately has a problem detected in genetic screening, what should be the next step? As the book's title states, newborn genetic screening aims to save babies. Screening isn't the end goal, it's just one link in preventing and treating genetic diseases. Next, 3 things need to be done. 1. Go to the genetic clinic for a follow-up appointment. 2. Have a doctor re-examine the child's condition. 3. If intervention and treatment for the child are needed. Next, I'll use a phenylketonuria patient mentioned in the book as an example to tell the story of a young couple.
Their daughter Sheris was screened for phenylketonuria after birth, and unfortunately the result was positive.
So, what should the anxious parents do?
First step: newborns with abnormal genetic screening results should promptly go to the genetic clinic for a follow-up.
Because genetic screening only determines the possibility that the infant has a certain disease genetically. But is the infant actually sick? How far has the disease progressed? What impact has the genetic disease had on the infant's body? These questions aren't certain, so the parents need to take the child to the genetic clinic for a follow-up. Sheris's parents immediately took her there, and Dr. Shellman saw them. Dr. Shellman performed a specialized examination on the child. Unlike regular checkups, genetic disease doctors focus on closely monitoring the child's growth and developmental progress. They often barrage parents with round after round of questions about the child's physical and cognitive development. For example, he'd ask Sheris's parents, can Sheris lift her head? Can she roll over? How's her self-sucking ability? Does she respond noticeably to parents' playfulness? These questions provide insight into the child's typical behavior while helping doctors build trust with parents and ease their anxiety.
Next, Dr. Shellman tracks data like height, weight, and head circumference, using follow-up tests to assess the child's health and prepare for treatment.
After the examination, Sheris's parents usually ask, how's our child now? Can she recover fully? How different will she be from normal kids after treatment?
So the second step addresses exactly this.
This requires the genetic specialist to conduct comprehensive and ongoing evaluations of the child's condition. The most common method here is standardized comparison. Standardized comparison means compiling data from healthy children at different development stages into benchmark charts, then plotting the patient's data on growth curves for comparison to assess health differences. In the first step, Dr. Shellman gave Sheris a thorough physical exam and plotted her data against age on growth curves. And after months of observation and repeated measurements, he found Sheris's height at the 90th percentile. This percentile range means Sheris is taller than 90% of normal children. Her weight and head circumference also landed in the 90th percentile, indicating good development without disease impact so far. Dr. Shellman also learned from Sheris's parents that she can stand with support, crawl independently, hold her bottle, and is teething.
Comparing these with child development standards, Dr. Shellman concluded, Sheris's condition is currently normal.
This gave Sheris's parents great confidence in her future growth and recovery. For affected children, they typically need monthly clinic follow-ups along with standardized comparisons. Each standardized comparison serves as a crucial developmental assessment. If the assessment isn't passed, or if the child's development doesn't match standard timelines, for example, if Sheris's height is at the 90th percentile, but her head circumference is only at the 40th, it indicates delayed brain development, prompting doctors to initiate step 3, treatment and intervention. For common newborn genetic disorders, the most frequent treatments include dietary management, developmental therapy, and organ transplants. Let's start with dietary management, the most vital treatment for metabolic disorders. For instance, children with phenylketonuria must limit high phenylalanine foods and consume more low phenylalanine options, like rice, corn, vegetables, and fruits, while avoiding seafood, eggs, milk, etc. Dietary adjustment. Though it sounds simple, implementation is actually quite challenging. Many harmful substances are essential for growth, so complete avoidance isn't possible. This requires genetic specialists and nutritionists to collaborate on personalized meal plans based on the child's condition and test results. The plan needs continuous fine-tuning as the child grows. Since families handle daily feeding, their cooperation significantly impacts effectiveness. Some PQ parents know how to calculate daily phenylalanine limits using nutrition labels, while others might only know to reduce eggs and milk. Treatment outcomes will clearly differ between these families.
Additionally, many children need expensive formula or supplements long-term, which some families can't sustain financially.
These are the real-world hurdles of dietary therapy. The second therapy for genetic disorders is developmental therapy. Developmental therapy involves providing intensive, targeted training at each specific age stage of a child's development. For instance, during language-sensitive periods, specialized rehabilitation therapists conduct conversational practice. When children start rolling, crawling, or standing, They use equipment and assistive tools for muscle strengthening exercises, or specialized training in daily living skills, for example. Genetic research shows most symptomatic children with genetic disorders experience developmental delays where nutritional management alone isn't enough. Without intervention, affected children might be physically healthy but suffer severe intellectual and self-care impairments. That's when developmental therapy supplements treatment to minimize developmental risks. I. Mellon Murray. S. The author mentions a girl named Dina encountered during her research. Newborn screening detected MMA, methylmalonic aciduria, a genetic disorder preventing methylmalonic acid breakdown. Beyond intellectual impacts, it causes ketoacidosis that can become life-threatening. Dina's parents followed the process: genetic counseling, evaluation, and dietary management. At 9 months, doctors noted only slight physical delays, otherwise normal development. By age 1, she was developing better than expected. Overjoyed by this news, her parents didn't realize she still needed language and strength exercises. At age 2, doctors found she spoke fewer than 20 simple phrases and couldn't walk independently. Clearly, the disease affected her development, requiring long-term therapy, hoping to catch up to peers. When dietary and developmental therapies can't stop deterioration, transplantation becomes the last defense. Though genetic defects can't be fixed, restoring function to disease-critical organs can significantly alleviate conditions. For example, enzymes needed for phenylketonuria and methylmalonic aciduria, mentioned earlier, are both liver synthesized. Children with such genetic disorders naturally can't produce these enzymes through their own livers. But normal people can. Therefore, if a normal liver is transplanted into the child, these diseases would naturally be cured. This treatment seems perfect, but not every child can endure it. First, organ matching is very difficult. It only works if it fits like a key in a lock. Otherwise, the transplanted organ just becomes a burden. Second, even with a successful match, organ transplant surgery is very challenging and carries extremely high risks. For example, in the U.S., liver transplants for children with genetic disorders have a mortality rate as high as 20% due to the young age of patients and post-operative infections. Not every family is willing to bear such high costs and risks. So, organ transplantation can only be the last line of defense to save the child when other treatments fail to control the condition. Although dietary management, developmental therapy, and organ transplants each have pros and cons, they are all effective ways to help children with genetic disorders relieve suffering and grow healthily. These follow-up measures for newborn genetic screening, together with the screening itself, have witnessed the newborn genetic disease defense system evolve from nothing to something, and from simple to comprehensive. Although after nearly 60 years of development, newborn genetic screening has taken initial shape in the U.S., there have always been controversies and resistance during its promotion, in light and fear on the U.S. So, what problems does newborn genetic screening face? And what will its future look like? This is what we'll cover in the third part. The biggest problem newborn genetic screening faces is the uncertainty of screening results. Simply put, current genetic testing has technological limitations. Results aren't 100% accurate, with some samples that should be positive testing negative, and some that should be negative testing positive. Therefore, based on existing genotypes and test results, newborn screening may not accurately identify patients and could even misidentify perfectly healthy children as sick. So where does this uncertainty come from? This has to start from the theoretical foundation of newborn genetic screening. Children with congenital genetic disorders have abnormal genes, and these abnormal genes cause physical manifestations different from normal children. So, for example, abnormal metabolites or specific clinical symptoms, like unusual components in blood or urine, or abnormal skin or hair color compared to normal people. So if we detect genetic abnormalities for a disorder in an infant, or find characteristic abnormal metabolites, we can diagnose that genetic condition. However, medicine's mystery lies in not always following 1 + 1 = 2 rules.
Take phenylketonuria. From 1962 to 1974, diagnosis relied on measuring phenylalanine levels in blood.
But genetic doctors soon discovered many infants with elevated phenylalanine showed no intellectual disability symptoms. These infants actually had benign hyperphenylalanemia. Patients lack the genetic defects of PKU and don't require dietary restrictions. If these infants ate low phenylalanine diets, they develop intellectual disability from amino acid deficiency. Clearly, incorrect treatments due to uncertain results make screening counterproductive. With technological advances like the Human Genome Project and tandem mass spectrometry for detecting trace metabolites, newborn screening accuracy has significantly improved since the 1960s and 70s. Yet technological progress created new uncertainties. Accurately finding disease-causing genes in newborns who never develop symptoms. The book mentions a boy named Paul who screened positive for glutaric acidemia genes. Children with this disease typically have intellectual disability, physical deformities, and uncontrolled movements. Though Paul appeared normal, with only slightly elevated blood levels, doctors still diagnosed him with glutaric acidemia. Unsurprisingly, Paul's parents were terrified and sought medical help everywhere. Yet throughout this process, Paul never showed physical deformities or intellectual abnormalities typical of the disease. Gradually, his parents relaxed from constant worry, and Paul grew up like any normal boy. Later, they had another son who developed normally, too. This gene non-expression occurs periodically in genetics. Geneticists propose theories. Maybe gene expression requires triggers, or maybe the body has self-correcting mechanisms that can sometimes prevent genetic diseases. But even today, geneticists haven't fully deciphered why this happens, whether failing to detect affected infants or diagnosing infants who never develop symptoms. These uncertainties significantly disrupt families' lives and undermine public confidence in screening programs. This remains the major barrier to widespread newborn screening adoption. Additionally, there are approximately 5,000 to 6,000 types of congenital genetic disorders. This number keeps growing as medical knowledge advances. The astronomical costs of covering such vast screening scope deter any nation or organization. Despite current limitations, after half a century of implementation, newborn screening's benefits still outweigh drawbacks. So what does its future hold? The author identifies two trends. First, after decades of development, newborn screening's expansion is now unstoppable. December 2010, statistics in the American Journal of Medical Genetics show newborn screening has become widespread preventive care across the U.S. From 2005 to 2009, California alone screened over 2.1 million newborns, identifying 4,580 with genetic disorders. After positive genetic screening results, following re-exams by genetic specialists, 754 children were diagnosed with certain genetic disorders. Of these affected kids, 492 received professional treatment, and sadly, only 62 infants passed away due to the disease. This shows newborn genetic screening has largely achieved early detection and treatment goals. Plus, the tech for newborn screening keeps advancing, and follow-up treatment systems will keep improving. Newborn genetic screening will play a broader role in the future. The second trend, newborn screening expansion, will be more cautious, partly because tech-wise, accuracy for many genetic disorders isn't high enough. Another reason is privacy concerns from large-scale screening. Given these, screening constantly deals with fear from uncertainty. Expanding recklessly would boost similar risks big time. That's the third reason to roll out newborn screening carefully. The book gives an example. In May 2011, U.S. geneticists met in Washington to discuss adding severe combined immunodeficiency, SCID, to newborn screening. After talks, they decided to make it mandatory only in New York and Wisconsin. This reflects caution and privacy, plus mass screening collects tons of baby blood samples and family data, with privacy protection varying widely across groups. How can we use samples legally while keeping personal privacy secure?
This is a new challenge newborn screening must tackle urgently, now and later.
Since starting in the mid 1900s, newborn screening tech has spread globally, saving countless babies from or at risk of genetic diseases. As Roman Roland said, even the least attractive child holds endless hope. Newborn screening is that light of hope for their futures. Despite risks, we should keep promoting it cautiously. All right, that wraps up our introduction to saving babies. The show notes are below, and we'll see you next episode.